All right, so the final results of the 2024 election are not yet in. Not every state has been called. Same goes for the Senate and the U.S. House, but we do know that the GOP won the Senate, the presidency, and it looks like they won the House. It has not been called yet, but I'm gonna basically call a Republican trifecta. So with that said, I'm going to give my breakdown, my analysis of the 2024 election, and I'm going to keep this really quick. So, part one, Selzer was always a quack, and Selzer, often lauded as the gold standard of Iowa polling, and polling in general. I can't think of a single pollster in the country that has a better reputation. She was idolized. Her polls were treated as the actual result in many cases. She was always a bad pollster. She was always a mediocre, below-average pollster. A quack's a strong word, sort of a, those are fighting words, I guess, but she was never that good. She got 2004 wrong. She predicted Kerry would win by 5. He lost by less than 1. He lost by about half a point. She was 7 points off in 2008. She did get the 2008 Democratic caucuses correct, which I don't think other pollsters did. That's one of her few really good results. 2012, she was right on the money in 2012 in the election. In 2014, she underestimated the Republicans, and keep in mind, so far she's only underestimated Republicans throughout her entire career. In 2014, she underestimated Republicans by 2-3 points, which was less than other pollsters, but it's still not being correct. Same with 2016, she underestimated Republicans by 2 points. 2018, she underestimated Republicans by 8 points. 2020, she underestimated Republicans in the general election by 2 points yet again. And she underestimated she underestimated Bernie Sanders in the 2020 Democratic caucuses by 11 points, that's a very big error. Like, that's embarrassing. That is... That alone should have told you that she was not a gold standard, and she could be very, very, very wrong. In 2024, she was off by 14 points. And this is just some speculation for me. Well, first off, her average error was like 4.5%, which is not good. The fact that she had like an A+ rating from 538 was very unearned, and I don't know how they do their math. I don't know their methodology for pollster ratings, but whatever it is, it's clearly severely flawed, because 4.5% is that's like 40th percentile for a pollster. She was below average. She always was. This was before 2024. She was below average. With 2024 out of the way, she should be getting 1 star, because they changed it to a star system. She should be getting a D grade, because her polls are just not amazing, and they never, ever, ever have been. And when I first saw that poll, it honestly... Because I was not aware of her history. Well, I was aware that she got 2016 and 2020 relatively accurate, but I was not aware of her deeper history, and I just was sort of going by her reputation as this gold standard pollster, and I was highly anticipating her poll. But her poll just showed something so utterly ridiculous and ludicrous that I second-guessed it. I second-guessed Selzer, which is something I said I would never do, and indeed, turns out she was a quack. And I'm glad I looked deep into her history. Otherwise, I would have gotten Iowa wrong. Now, with that said, I predicted in my final forecast that Iowa would be like 5-ish points Republican, 5 or 6-ish, so somewhere in that range. I don't remember my forecast now. But that was my prediction. And Trump won by 13, 14 points. I'm not even sure all the votes are counted yet, but yeah. He won pretty big in Iowa. And so my forecast severely underestimated him. And my forecast actually did not take into account the Selzer poll at all. My forecast did not take her poll into account at all. The reason why I predicted it to be a somewhat closer race, my forecast was probably middle of the road as far as Trump's Iowa projection. But the reason I didn't include Selzer, and the reason it still showed a close race, was because Iowa is very rarely 10% or more, or even like 8 or 9% off of the result of Wisconsin. Its partisan lean has never been that far off of what Wisconsin's is. So I genuinely thought that there was going to be some reversion to the mean this year, and that the extreme GOP leaning result in 2016 to 2020 was something of a fluke, and that Iowa was poised to be closer to the national average without it necessarily saying anything about Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. In fact, I was projecting Trump would win those 3 states, and he did. But yeah, Iowa, I predicted would be closer to Wisconsin, basically. And the fact that it's looking like it's going to be 10, 11 points off of Wisconsin this year is interesting. So I guess I got that. I didn't get that perfectly right. I did get the winner, though, unlike Selzer, so she is a quack. You could ignore her now. And, yeah, I guess Iowa's partisan lean is just getting so much more Republican at a much faster rate than Wisconsin, so keep that in mind. All right, now Lichman versus Selzer. I'm going to keep this very short. Alan Lichman is a hack. He always has been. And I just thought it was funny that Lichman and Selzer have actually been feuding since 2012. People are only talking about their recent feud, but no, they've been at each other's throats since 2012. There are some old New York Times op-eds that they were both writing, and both of them Lichman is a total hack. Do not listen to him. He talks about how his keys got all these elections right. Honestly, it's not like he got 10 super difficult elections right. It's not like he got 10 super difficult elections right. Of the elections he got right, almost all of them were somewhat predictable. Either the polls showed it as a landslide victory, or at least not very competitive, or otherwise there was an incumbent running, and you could be pretty confident with incumbents, or the economy was objectively horrible, like 2020. So, his keys aren't totally worthless as a prediction tool. Like, you'd rather predict using the keys than randomly guessing, of course, but it's not as accurate as polls. And it's really, his keys would be the input method for polls, essentially. His keys are what determine the polls, but ultimately you should be looking at the output, which is the polls. He's just a hack. Don't listen to Lichman ever. He was very wrong this time, embarrassingly wrong. And he's also altered the record on his own record of prognostication. He outright lies about what happened in 2000 and 2016, about what his predictions were, to try to make it look like he got it both right when he did not. He either got one of them wrong or the other, and he will not admit to that. So as for Selzer is, I was actually originally going to release a big, long essay on why Selzer is actually a pretty good political scientist, and I am quite fond of him. And I had that idea in my head for a year before the election to release a video on Selzer, and I was going to release it after the election. And I anticipated Selzer was going to do better in this election than prior cycles. He actually did rather poorly this time around. But for most of the cycle, Nate Selzer was correctly predicting a Trump win, and for like all the right reasons. But then last second, he just switched to Harris, and even though there was actual raw data and signs that this was not going to happen, he can't just blame his model. His model could have been tweaked to be more accurate, and he could have known this ahead of time. With all of that said, he did get 2008 very bright. It was a near perfect cycle, 50 out of 51. Very good. That alone should cement him as someone you should listen to. 2012, he had a perfect cycle. Very, 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 very good. 2016. He always talks about how he gave Trump the largest chance, but that's only because the tails on his bell curves were just so long, and it's just because he wasn't even confident in his own predictions. And he was giving Trump like absurdly high odds of winning states like Washington and Oregon. He's even giving Clinton puncher shots in like Mississippi and Louisiana, and that was never going to happen. So, yeah. The only reason why the 2016 election looked close is just because he wasn't even confident in his own predictions, and his actual averages and his were not different from a lot of other models. A lot of those were much too conservative with their confidence intervals and their tails on their bell curves. But Selzer, Yeah, I don't like his 2016 predictions. Actually, I consider the New York Times upshot model to have been a better model and to have more accurately reflected the data. It gave Trump a 16% chance. I think a 16% chance was a very realistic chance to give him, given the numbers that were available. And 28 was unrealistic, and you could only arrive at 28% by if you're doing the confidence intervals wrong, which he was. The New York Times upshot model technically gave Trump a lower chance, but also it did so using more reliable methods, essentially. So I actually preferred that model in 2016. 2020, Nate did okay. He did okay. Like, it wasn't amazing. 2022, he did not predict a red white wave. That's a lie. Total lie. He did okay in 2022 as well. He didn't do amazing. He did okay. 2018, he did pretty well. This cycle, he did pretty bad, and he's just not the same as he used to be. With that said, just because 2012 and 2008, like, he deserves to be ranked as one of the greatest prognosticators of all time. I'd put him number 3. I have a list. I'd put him at number 3. Silver gets the bronze medal. But, it's still pretty good. Part 3, 2028 and basic EC math. Florida, Texas, Iowa, and Ohio all were more than 10% Republican than the national average this time. The Democrats could ostensibly be winning the popular vote in 2028 by double digits, and Texas, Florida, Ohio, and Iowa still would turn Republican. If they're winning 5 to 10 points, those states are still not even in play. They're not. The Democrats are not going to pull off an upset in those states. It's not going to happen, period. In 2028, the Democrats should just not focus on those 4 states at all. It's not going to happen. They're not going to win. With that said, every other state that was won by the Republicans that is kind of considered a swing state, like North Carolina, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and that's it, I think. Every other state, the Democrats have a realistic shot in, and they don't have to necessarily greatly improve their performance or win the popular vote by a lot. They only need to win by 5 points to get all of those states, and that would put them at roughly Obama 2012 territory. If the Democrats win 2028 by 10% in the popular vote, the GOP electoral college edge is so absurd that would only give them a victory on the scale of Obama 2012 and much short of Obama 2008. So yeah, they have they have a lot of work to do if they want to have a true electoral college landslide, but they don't have a lot of work to do if they just want to win outright. So those should be their targets. North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, and Wisconsin. And don't even really worry about Nevada. Nevada's inconsequential. As for Republicans, pick up opportunities in 2028. As it stands, New Jersey, Illinois, Maine, Minnesota, and New Hampshire. Now, all of those are pickup opportunities to some extent. Some of those are more fringe than others. New Jersey's is roughly in the same position that, say, Maine was after 2020. Now, ultimately, the Republicans didn't win Maine in 2024, but it's in about the same position that Maine was in 2020. And obviously, a lot of people are going to be giving the Republicans a shot in Maine, just like they gave Republicans a shot in Maine for 2024. New Jersey's, like, if the GOP plays their cards right, there's a chance. There's a chance that they win New Jersey in the future. Wouldn't bet on it. Probably shouldn't be their top priority, but they are in striking position right now. It is a potential pickup. Illinois, a bigger stretch, but even so, Illinois is in about a slightly better position than Maine was after 2012. So you never know. Finally, you have New Hampshire and Minnesota. Obviously, Republicans have real shots there. Those are actual swing states. And Minnesota in particular has been more GOP than the national average in some elections, as has New Hampshire. And both of those states just sort of swing and trend randomly. Their partisan lean can be pretty random at times. So yeah, they always have a shot in those states. They always have. They always will. If they win those states in 2028 and may even lose like a Sunbelt state or something, I wouldn't be shocked. So that's the basic math. What type of environment do I think 2028 is going to be? Quite frankly, it's heavily leaning D. I'm basically, my preliminary prediction is that the Democrats win every swing state. So once again, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada, along with every other state that they won this time around. So there you go. That's my prediction. They're going to win every swing state. Probably going to win the popular vote by more than 5%. It's not a blowout per se, but it's not competitive. It's I consider anything within 5% competitive, anything within 10% to at least not be a landslide or a blowout. If it's more than 10% popular vote victory or like 400% electoral votes, you would call that a landslide. So with that said, yeah, it's going to be a pretty heavily leaning Democrat environment. Trump never been super popular. Even now, he's like, I guess he's at like a 50-50 favorable rating at this moment as I speak. Probably the highest he's ever been. He just won the popular vote, but I don't think he got a majority. We'll have to see once all the votes are counted. He got like a bare plurality. Yeah, Trump's very controversial. Obviously, I don't expect his second term to go super well. I don't consider any administration of the 21st century to have been particularly effective, and yeah, I definitely don't see, say, Vance winning in a landslide because Trump just did this amazing job, and everyone could agree that Trump did an amazing job. It's not going to happen. If anything, I see the incumbency as a disadvantage these days, even if you're just running for your second term. It's a bit of a disadvantage. So, yeah, 2028 is going to be Dems. I'm pretty confident the Dems are going to win that election. So as for part 4, who did I vote for? 2016, I voted for Trump. 2020, I mildly supported Trump over Biden, but I actually voted for Biden. And the reason being was that it was rather convenient for me to... it was rather convenient for me to vote that year. I actually wasn't planning on voting, but circumstances just allowed for it, so that I was able to just not even go out of my way to vote. So I voted that year, and I voted for Biden in 2020, and that's because I didn't necessarily dislike Biden. I still think very highly of him, and I was very grateful for what he did in the primaries and how he really rooted out extremism in his own party. And yeah, I'm just happy with what he did when he defeated Sanders. So I felt like I owed him something because he was putting the Democrats in a more centrist direction, which I like. So I voted for him. I supported Trump's policies a little bit more, all in all, but also I didn't truly think either of them had absolutely amazing policies. So I just went for Biden. 2024, I was actually planning on voting Biden again, and this wasn't like leaning Biden. I was a pretty hard Biden supporter because of just how well I feel he's handled our foreign policy, and particularly his support of Ukraine. Very, very pro-Biden this election. And to me, geopolitics is the most important issue. Americans' position in the world relative to these other nations. So when I saw that he was doing his best to undermine our second greatest geopolitical rival in Russia, I thought that was a great thing, a wonderful thing. I was happy with all the aid he was sending to Ukraine. American hegemony over Europe is a great thing. I was strongly supporting him, and I was absolutely livid that Trump was anti-Ukraine. Then Biden dropped out, and they put in Harris. And there's one thing that's a little bit more important to me than geopolitics. There's one thing, and that's merit. And I did not see that in Harris to any extent, significantly less so than even Trump. And Trump at least won 3 primaries, right? Harris never did such a thing. She's a diversity hire, and it's a fact that she only became the VP because of her gender. if she was born a male, she would not have been the VP in the first place. It's a matter of public record that Biden was excluding male candidates. He said so explicitly in many interviews and rallies. He was only considering women for the position. She would not have been VP if she was male. And there were other women considered. Ultimately, the tiebreaker came down to the fact that Kamala isn't white. Well, she's not completely white. She's what is it, like a quarter black, a quarter Asian or something? I don't remember. Indian. Her racial makeup is definitely the hardest to keep track of any candidate. But yeah, she was just a diversity hire to me, and I don't support diversity hires. That's as low as you possibly can go. I can't think of anyone less qualified for the job than a diversity hire. Even a con man who's outright wants to destroy America's standing in the world, and that's kind of what I view Trump as right now. Even a con man is better than a diversity hire, and it's not even close to me. So I did not vote this year, however, because I don't live in a competitive state. I do not live in a competitive state, and I just saw it as a waste of time. But if I was in a swing state, I would have voted for Trump. With that said, I was rooting for DeSantis in the primaries. I really liked DeSantis in the primaries. I wish he had won the nomination. Well, there you go. There's the basics of... See, that's not even really a breakdown. I didn't tell you why Trump won. And the truth is, I kind of don't want to give my secrets away as to my prognostication skills and tricks. You'll just have to figure that out for yourself. But I gave a pretty good explanation as to why I was predicting each state back in May. And in May, I got 50 out of 51 states correct, long term. The only state I got wrong was Nevada. So there you go. I'm pretty proud of that as well. And I got every state correct in my last forecast. So a magician does not reveal all his secrets. And this is now the third cycle in a row where I've got almost every state right, or every state. In 2016 and 2020, I went 50 for 51. This time, I went 51 for 51, so I'm very proud of myself. Well, that's it. That's all I got for you. Bye.